So, hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. We're in a very mirthful mood today, even
Yeah, well,
though
I mean, George always just get a kick. He gets a kick out of the countdown. I'm just never
exactly the countdown always excites me. It's like I think I'm a Canaveral or Cape Kennedy used to be. So
or it's having your cake and eating it too.
exactly. So Peter, I gather you're not at the best of health.
A little bit under the weather. I mean, it's been a really grueling winter here. It's as I've told Georgia a number of times. We had a really, they talked about the snowstorm on the East Coast. Oh, come on, give me a break, okay? I mean, we got blanketed for day after day after day of snow, and living here for so long. After 2 days, they've cleared it, and they do a really great job. Really, it's amazing. 2 weeks later, and they're still clearing it. And they have an army, literally an army, to clear the streets. And so this prolonged cold, maybe it's just kind of wearing me down. I don't know. Okay. And plus, it always happens. One person at work gets something, and then eventually everybody else gets it. So it's kind of a combination. But you know what, George? Seeing you and doing this live stream has really lifted my spirits.
It's lifted your spirits.
I'm really glad to see you and everybody else here.
Good to go. All right, that's good. So there are a few things that we need to talk about today. Well, the first thing is that Bibi Netanyahu is once again to the United States.
In a hurry, yeah.
In a hurry. He spends more time in Washington than Lindsey Graham spends in Israel. I mean, it's a kind of a swap. Bibi is here, Lindsey Graham is there. Lindsey Graham is up for re-election, and it's quite, you have to think, why would people of South Carolina vote for somebody who spends all of his time in Israel? I mean, it's like, he is never voiced the concerns of South Carolinians. He's always preoccupied with Israel.
And you have to wonder, spending so much time there, is he some kind of surrogate for the president of the United States? Or is he running his own show? And it looks like he's running his own show.
I tend to think he's running his own show. I don't really want to speculate, but there's always there's a certain type of person, shall we say, who spends a lot of time in Israel.
Well, we don't want to speculate, but we're going to speculate.
Exactly, and we can name a certain other kinds of people who do. Spend a lot of time in Israel, and I think they have certain tastes and whatever.
Well, it is a refuge of sorts, if you know what I mean.
It is a refuge of sorts. Yes.
If you get in hot water with a certain passion that you may have, you always have a destination there. It's always open.
That's right. That's right.
That's what we call him, Lady Graham. Okay.
That's right. Exactly.
But another term for him is catching on. Ladybug is catching on him.
I haven't come across that.
Yeah, it's trending. Yes. Okay.
Ladybug. I mean, that's those little insects.
They're kind of cute.
Yeah, they're very cute.
Yeah, but Lindsey Graham is anything but. Did you see him? It was not this weekend. The weekend before, he was loaded on one of the Sunday shows. He was slurping his work. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness!
Was he in Israel at the time?
No, well, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between news agencies in America and in television. It's hard to tell. It's hard. I think he was in America. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, and of course, the presenters say, "Well, Senator Graham, do you think you've had maybe one too many?" Of course. And plus, to add to all of it, it's in the morning. Okay. You always ask a question. I mean, is this a residue of the night before, or does he never stop?
Yes. No. That's right. Yeah, I mean, when he was with Rudy Giuliani, at least it was late in the evening when he would show up for Laura Ingram's show.
Yeah, but with Rudy, he was having a good time. He was, I mean, everybody knows I wear cufflinks here, and he's like playing with his cufflink and rolling that huge ring on his finger, okay? And he was just happy as could be. And even, Laura Ingram is saying, maybe you shouldn't be saying these things.
Yes.
But the more, maybe it was like ABC News or something like that, they're so moronic, okay?
Right.
Well, this is the natural state of U.S. senators today, okay?
That's right. Well, U.S. senators have never been known for their sobriety or their clean, punctilious living. I mean, they were notorious for hard drinking. But at least
Yeah,
they didn't.
well, I mean,
In
you'd
those
have
days, they didn't
nothing.
show up in the TV studios.
Yeah, but you have a job for 6 years, and you'd have to go to work 1 or 2 days a month. I mean, tell me one senator that's overworked.
No, that never happened.
That doesn't happen.
But you remember those guys? I mean, goes back a few generations. Who used to get caught, drunk out of their minds in the fountain, or caught with ladies of easy virtue. Some out in the streets. Wilbur Mills. These were heavyweight. These
Oh,
were
wow.
heavyweights.
Haven't heard that name in a long
No,
time.
that's right.
Oh, good old Wilbur. I mean,
Yeah.
that guy knew how to have a good time. The problem is he never remembered it the next morning. Okay.
No. But it was a little embarrassing when they get arrested. Then you have a problem because then there's a case you have to answer, and it's. There was, of course, there was a guy who worked for Lyndon Johnson, but he was a White House chief of staff, kind of caught in the men's room. I think it was Walter Jenkins. I think his name.
Yeah, you know what? You know what his nickname was? Little Lyndon.
Little Lyndon.
He was called Little Lyndon.
Okay.
He was like a son to Lyndon, and he would even phrase it in that way. Of course, George was talking about the men's room incident. This gentleman had 6 children, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe the men's room was some kind of relief because working for Lyndon Johnson was not easy, and that was a very different time. And I don't judge either way. But Johnson cut him loose in a nanosecond, and told you a lot about Lyndon Johnson. He didn't fight for him.
Right. No, but you're caught in the men's room. He was caught not relieving himself. I mean, he was caught.
Yes,
in flagrante. So I mean, I think that was the that was the embarrassing issue.
He didn't get arrested for urination. Okay.
Exactly. That's not a crime. But there was a guy also who used to work for FDR, Sumner Wells. But in those days, you could hide these things. You could cover them up. I mean, by the time of Lyndon Johnson, it was already harder to cover these things up. But in the FDR's day, you just simply covered it up. The president, put in a call, and the whole thing was hushed up. But anyway, now we've got that.
But what's interesting here is that Lindsey Graham falls into the same category. It's how this conversation started.
That's right. That's right.
It's a sign of the times how dismal things are when we're talking about Lindsey Graham in the first 5 minutes. Okay.
Yes, exactly. But for instance, Tucker Carlson, who obviously can't stand his politics, he always says, "Well, he's a really delightful person." So it may be that's who he is in socially. He just spends his precisely in like he's drunk and whatever. I mean, I don't know, gregarious, let's say.
Oh wow, you're so generous, George. No, he's a scumball. Okay,
right.
That's what he is.
Yes. But anyway, so Netanyahu is he's flying into Washington. This has to be what, 7th visit or whatever.
Yeah, in this presidential term. Yes,
in this presidential term. So that's just a little more than 1 year. That's very frequent. And also, when he arrives, he usually stays for some time. It's not like he flies in one meeting and then he flies back.
Where does he usually stay?
Where does he stay? Yeah.
Blair House, but not this time. It hasn't been confirmed that he'll be staying. The Blair House is it's a privately owned hotel, but it's basically an extension of the White House. If you own the Blair House, I mean, you just go to the bank every single year because the White House just rents the whole thing year round. Right. It doesn't matter if somebody's there. Okay. Right. So the Blair House, and this is also it's a very beautiful mansion. It's extremely 19th century, very beautiful. And that's where the president-elect and his family lived 2 or 3 days before inauguration. Yep, right. I think Trump did that as well. Right. So, but see, what Netanyahu did, that he expects his suite at the Blair House. You know what? Another thing that Netanyahu does, and it's very degrading for his guests. You know what he does? He brings his dirty laundry.
Yes, that's right.
And I guess like one of his assistants hands a bag of his dirty laundry, like clean my lawn. You can't clean it in Israel, but that's
what I was thinking. Why, there are no cleaners in Israel? I mean, is that the problem? There's no one's going to do it. or he has to because he
Oh,
gets.
maybe somebody will never do his laundry. I hadn't thought about that.
Well,
That's
okay,
important.
but or it may be that he gets it on the house. He gets it for free when he comes to the U.S. Where in Israel he has to pay for it. So maybe that, at least he saves some money on your laundry.
No,
But
it's a for it's a form of denigrating your host. That's what it is. And he does.
it is rather, I mean, it's like being a guest at somebody else's house and you bring your dirty laundry and expect, your host to clean it for you. Yeah. Um, but the thrust of this upcoming meeting is obviously that Netanyahu isn't too happy
You know,
with these
Donald, we're on the clock. Donald, we're on the
That's
clock.
right. That's right. So here, I mean, this is like they're obviously very unhappy by when after the meeting in Oman, there was the 8-hour meeting in Oman, which was never face to face. I mean, I think they shook hands, but there was not. It wasn't a face to face meeting. So it was the Omani representatives was acted as a mediator, going from one room to the other. But nonetheless, Trump after the meeting said, "Yeah, great meeting, fantastic. We're making progress. Iran wants a deal. Everything great." But that was enough to induce panic um, with Netanyahu because he's afraid. He really just doesn't trust Trump. He just
Yeah,
thinks
because
Trump can
Netanyahu
settle for something.
he was supposed to go to next week to the APAC, the annual APAC meeting, and he's gone a week earlier. Okay.
Right,
Uh,
but yes, but this is going to be a short visit because he's not going to the Board of Peace meeting, which is
oh,
quite
I,
interesting.
I wonder
The
why.
Board of Peace meeting is going to be the next day, I think. So the 18th is this going to be this meeting Wednesday of next week, and so here was the announcement from Netanyahu's office, and this says here that. Prime Minister Netanyahu is expected to meet with US President Donald Trump this week, Wednesday, in Washington, and will discuss with him negotiations with Iran. The Prime Minister believes any negotiations must include limitations on ballistic missiles and a halting of the support for the Iranian axis. So he's making it clear. He's laying down conditions for what the US should accept in these talks, which don't involve Israel. This is it's between the U.S. and Iran, and Israel is laying down the law as to what it expects to come out of these talks. Must include limitations on ballistic missiles and the halting of the support for the
But
Iranian
what
axis.
happened? I thought Iran was going to get the bomb within 3 weeks, but then he's been saying it since 1997.
But yeah, that's right. That's right. Um, and then we have the Jerusalem Post writes, Israel warns Trump, we may act alone if Iran crosses ballistic missile red line. This is, of course, complete fraud because, of course,
That just okay.
yeah, because of course, Israel isn't going to act alone. They figure we act,
That's
Iran
why they're
retaliates.
not going to act alone. That's why they want Trump to act alone.
Exactly. But what like as happened last June, they will attack when Iran retaliates, and Israel says, "Hey, we're under attack by Iran. You need to come and help us." And then Trump comes in and helps. So he said the notion that Israel is just going to act alone without U.S. support is a fraud. It's a hoax. Anyway, here's Israeli defense officials recently told their U.S. counterparts that Iran's ballistic missile program represents an existential threat. So it's now the ballistic missile program is an existential threat. So it used to be the bomb, the enrichment, just enrichment posed an existential threat. Now it's already the ballistic missile program that's an existential threat.
Well, just as a quick background, is that the talks that are going on in Oman. I don't think the next one has been scheduled. Iran said that they would enter negotiations only about the nuclear program and nuclear weapons
Well,
only,
that's it. Yeah,
and nothing else. And this is why Bibi is wetting his pants.
well,
Okay?
that's right. That's what they're angry at, and that's why he doesn't trust Trump. That's why he keeps rushing to see Trump, because he thinks that Trump would just do a deal. Hey, there's a deal to be made.
Yep. You
Let's
know
make
why?
a deal.
Because he's painted himself into a corner and he wants to get out of this ASAP.
All right. According to security sources, Israeli intentions to dismantle Iran's missile capabilities and production infrastructure were conveyed in recent weeks through a series of high-level exchanges. Military officials outlined operational concepts to degrade the program, including strikes on key manufacturing sites. So this is this is this is what we're going to do. Now, of course, they figure that Trump isn't going to say to them, "Well, okay, well, go ahead, but include us out." Instead, they think, that we're gonna, we're gonna do it, and then when we're under attack, hey, Mr. Trump, please come and help us. And
that's real leadership, isn't it, George?
yes, it really is. Yeah.
God, it's just embarrassing.
That's right. We told the Americans we will strike alone. If Iran crosses the red line, we set on ballistic missiles. What is that? Yeah, that's the red line. So presumably already Iran has crossed it, because Iran obviously has ballistic missiles that reach Israel. So what's the red line? The source said, adding that Israel is not yet at the threshold, but is continuously tracking developments inside Iran. The official stressed that Israel reserves freedom of action and emphasized that it will not allow Iran to restore strategic weapons system on a scale that threatens Israel's existence.
Yeah, so Iran doesn't have any red lines, of course. Iran should be unrestrained when according to themselves, when they face an existential threat. I mean, none of this is. There's no parity of logic ever here.
No, not at all. But the plan here is, of course, to leave Iran defenseless. I mean, that's the Israeli logic. Yeah, we'll leave Iran
and
defenseless.
Then there will be no Iran. Okay, not a defenseless Iran, a broken up Iran.
A broken up, but the plan is to have Iran as just just a bigger version of Syria, a country that you can bomb at will. You can sponsor terrorist movements inside the country. You can sponsor irredentist movements, sponsor any kind of nationalism, Islamic, secular Islamic, radical Islamism, whatever. You can just sponsor and attack them at any time you feel like.
Royalists
exactly, because sponsor royalists, well, whoever. That's what they did to Syria. They basically, it used to be a state, and then they just reduced it to just a kind of a mixture of various factions.
Well, according to Alistair Crook, his wife is literate in Hebrew, and she has conveyed to him that the Hebrew press is a lot more ominous and threatening to Trump. We'll drop you. We'll drop you. Okay. Yeah. It's very interesting. The Israelis curate their message very carefully. I mean, has anyone noticed that you can't translate Hebrew into English on Twitter now? Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I didn't know that. No.
Yeah.
One defense officials described the current moment as a historic opportunity to deliver a significant blow to Iran's missile infrastructure.
For 30 years, it's a historic opportunity.
It's always opportunity. But the historic opportunity, they figure that Trump isn't going to be there for that long, and they are worried about what happens after the midterms.
I've long said,
will Trump be after November?
What did I do at the very beginning? Time is a ticking, and that's the message to Trump. Okay, I mean it's very interesting. The shoe is on the other foot, because George and I have, on many occasions, noted that Trump is in a hurry to create his legacy because, again, he doesn't know what's going to happen in November. Well, given the poll numbers, it's going to be a disaster for him. And he, usually we see him as wanting to leave his mark. Venezuela, Greenland, Panama, Canada, or whatever. But Bibi has a different calculation. Yeah, there's a clock ticking, and it's ticking against you.
Well, that's right, and I think that's they're concerned because there's going to be impeachments. He's going to be preoccupied with impeachments. He'll also be quite concerned about ensuring at the very least that he will be followed by a Republican. So therefore, he's going to have to make sure that anything that he does isn't going to ensure a Republican catastrophe in 2028. So that will also constrain him, because otherwise, it'll all be just rats leaving the sinking ship. I mean, everyone in the administration is going to be leaving and saying, "Hey, we don't want to associate ourselves with Trump. We need to be planning for 2028." So that's another reason why this is the time to move, because after the midterms, Trump is going to have a lot of other things on his mind.
Yeah, and I think George stands alone in suggesting, and I absolutely, completely agree with him. Part of the calculation and following what Netanyahu wants is that, Donald, you may need a lot of legal help.
Exactly. There's going to be the legal
And,
help. Yeah,
you're going to need some people with some very deep pockets,
that's right.
because they're going to come at you from every single direction and twice
Yeah.
on Sunday.
That's right. There's going to be all sorts of things. There's going to be lawsuits galore. There's going to bog him and his family down after he leaves office. So he's going to need a lot of high-powered lawyers who are
Well,
themselves
it also
ardent
makes
Zionists.
it may also explain, and George and I have talked about this also in the past, is that his Trump's assets may be will certainly be on the line if he faces litigation. I think that explains why he's trying to extend his tentacles all the way through the greater Middle East, because he needs to protect his There'll be assets
Yeah,
abroad, and he's
yeah.
thinking
No,
about
I
his family finances. Okay.
yeah, that's right.
And he want and I personally, this is my own personal opinion. That's why Witkoff and Kushner have been given that file, okay? Because they accomplished nothing. But what do they do in the evening? They talk to financiers. Do you think they're talking politics? No. There's some. I saw some good property here, and we have and we don't have to spend any of our money,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah. No, I think so. And I mean, we saw what happened between 2020 and 2024, when he had all the criminal prosecutions that were coming his way, which could easily be coming his way after he leaves office, and I think there will be. They're going to try and pass the charges to take account of the Supreme Court ruling and say, well, yeah, okay, these were his official acts, but we're trying him or prosecuting him for his unofficial acts. So they're going to find ways to get around the Supreme Court restriction. But then there's going to be the civil cases. We saw what Tish James did to him in New York, and they hit him with what was it? I can't remember. It's a huge, absolutely huge fine, a ludicrous fine, with a view to just bring him to bankruptcy. So that's also down the line. But anyway, here it says, within the IDF, Brigadier General Omer Tischler, the incoming Air Force commander, is expected to accompany Netanyahu. So that's nice. You got the IDF is accompanying him on this trip, and then Tischler will represent IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, as there is currently no defense attaché in Washington, following Defense Minister Israel Katz's decision.
Well, I mean,
Not yet. So anyway,
why would a president let that? I mean, he has his own intelligence apparatus, doesn't he?
Right. Look, no, I mean,
I find it really just bizarre.
Well, I mean, look, he's going to be there. Hey, these are the targets. He's going to be. Look, it's clear that Trump has chosen to listen to Israeli intelligence rather than to his own intelligence. So he's going to be there with a list of targets. These are the targets to hit. I mean, that way you bring the IDF there. It's like, hey, and we need to hit the targets now. So
No, not we. You
exactly, you. That's right. So
no, Israel doesn't want to get involved in this at all. That's the plan.
Right. That's exactly. And let me just. So let me just to go back to that. There's also an article in Axios. You can see here we also that just to make clear the sense of panic in the Israeli camp. That here's that says Netanyahu to hold urgent meeting with Trump amid Iran negotiations. And then he's expected to meet President Trump on Wednesday to discuss the negotiations with Iran. And it said Trump said the U.S. and Iran had very good talks. Netanyahu's statement hinted the prime minister is concerned the U.S. might pursue a narrow nuclear deal. Yeah, we saw that. And not address other Israeli concerns, because of course that's the role of a U.S. president, to address Israeli concerns. That's your job. That's part of your job
Well,
description.
it's this president's job, that's for sure.
um, and then the prime minister's office said in a statement that the side will look at that, and it says originally Netanyahu was planning to meet Trump on February the 18th. That was the plan. So it's been brought forward. And then a White House official tells Axios it was Netanyahu who asked Friday to move up his visit by a week and meet Trump this coming Wednesday. Netanyahu's early arrival to Washington will also allow him to skip the Gaza Board of Peace leaders meeting planned for February 19th. So he can stay a few days. So that's good, because he that means, because it's going to be this week, and therefore it's not going to mess up the Board of Peace meeting. And then so that clearly there's panic stations in in Israel. They simply do not trust Trump. They just feel that that Trump is someone who is going to he'll be tempted by a deal. They think, hey, this is a deal, and of course common sense was, they know perfectly well, common sense was just, hey, there's a deal to be had here. You're a deal maker, make the deal. and there's it's just breaking into an open door. There's a deal to be had here.
Yeah, but George, you pointed it out on Sunday, and I think it's such a prescient comment. What has he negotiated at all during his presidency? Nothing. Nothing. There's no art of the deal here. I mean, his inclination, because he's boxed himself into a corner. He believed the wrong people. He believed in Israeli intelligence, and now he finds himself where he is. He has every reason to make a deal right
He has every
now.
reason. Yeah, no, that's right. But there's of course the Gaza. I mean, that he has negotiated that, and he has that's going ahead. This is
Well, I
the
wouldn't necessarily call that
well.
a
I'm just saying,
negotiation,
at
but
least he
anyway.
has moved forward on that. I agree. I mean, we're a long way
Okay,
from anything. But
he's
he has
moved
moved
forward
forward
on that. I agree with
on
you
that.
on that.
We're into phase two, which again Netanyahu does not want. I mean, this is again something that he's going to want to um, destroy somehow. But because this is Trump's baby, it's not that easy for him to do. But here again, there's the article in Axios about this upcoming Board of Peace meeting, and here's the story. And this is and it says the White House is planning this February the 19th, and so on. And then it will be the first Board of Peace meeting and the fundraising conference for Gaza reconstruction. Plans or in early stages, and then the unveiling of the board last month was met with widespread skepticism. Most Western allies didn't join, in part because the charter gives the board a broad mandate and Trump the sole veto over its decision. Some allies felt that Trump was like that with UN Security Council. And then the board currently has 27 members and is chaired by Trump. UN Security Council authorized it to oversee the implementation of the Gaza ceasefire. And then and the Trump administration started reaching out to dozens of countries on Friday to invite their leaders and discuss logistics. And then while the implementation of the second phase has started, it's moving very slowly. Israel agreed to open the Rafah crossing, but only a very small number of Palestinians have been allowed through. A Palestinian technocratic government has been established, but still hasn't entered Gaza and is working from Egypt. So, I think we can say that, well, we're a long way from implementation. However, I have to say, it has a certain originality. I mean, he's done this; no one else has done it, and if it works, that's great. If it fails, well, then yeah, okay, it fails. But at least he has done something. He hasn't just sort of wrung his
Yeah,
hands
well, yeah. At the same time, the
meaninglessly.
killing, the killings continue.
Yeah, but at
Okay,
a much
yeah,
smaller rate.
but nonetheless, it's
Yeah,
not a
I know.
blow.
It's not a ceasefire in the sense that the fire has ceased, but there's a difference between say 500 in 4 months
Well,
and 52,000
the
in 24 months.
the default position that George and I have agreed upon, and I think we both agree upon it in good faith. I'm very critical and I'm very skeptical, but George and I have come to an agreement that it's the only game in town. So let that game play out.
I think so. I think that's reasonable. Now, um, the other thing that is worth thinking about is, is that this is going to be a big week for Europe. The Europeans are having a number of meetings this week, and it's going to culminate in the Munich Security Conference. And again, we didn't get a damn invitation.
It's so interesting. In this time of great power politics, you have to have power. You need to be able to make things that other people want and buy at a
Right.
decent
Right.
profit. Europeans, they generate meetings. Okay,
They do that.
that's their bumper crop every year. We had the number of meetings. Okay,
Right.
which of course, if you're a caterer, you're in good shape. Okay, but I'm sure George, you're going to tell us what these meetings are, because if I ever have insomnia, I think about European meetings.
It's well, before we get to that, you know, JD Vance was in Italy at the opening of the Winter
Yeah,
Olympics,
Olympic.
and he got booed. And this aroused a lot of commentary. That, to be honest, I don't remember a time when U.S. presidents were not booed. I mean, well, some weren't booed, but generally, I mean, it's
I think
more U.S. presidents have been booed than not booed.
I think there's
Obama was never booed, but
okay.
other
There you
presidents
go.
were.
Okay,
Yeah.
remember when he did his pre-inauguration European tour?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Messiah. Yeah, came
Yes.
from
No,
across.
exactly. The Europeans are disgusting, and it is true that the Europeans do love Democrat presidents a lot more than Republican presidents. So yeah, George W. Bush was booed, and Reagan was booed. Oddly enough, I think Jimmy Carter was booed as well. They didn't. The Europeans never really took to Jimmy Carter. He was just too
Yeah, and the problem
Georgian.
is
It just
no,
didn't.
no one took
Europeans couldn't
the
relate to
problem
him.
is that no one took the Jimmy Carter. Okay.
No, that's right. So it was kind of a kind of a non-event that Europeans booed JD Vance. However, Kaya Kallas, he's done this and thought that this expressed a kind of European vitality. Because she actually she hates the Trump administration because it's not going to war. I mean, it's that that's why it just fills her with rage that the
Well,
Trump
I
administration
think it
is not
fills
going to
her with
war against Russia.
I think what fills her with rage and accentuates her insecurity is that nobody in Washington wants to talk to her.
That is a problem. That is a problem when they say we're not gonna meet with her. Even Marco Rubio, that's somebody the Europeans should like, and I think they generally do like him. Even he says I can't be in the same room as her. So anyway, so she gave this interview today. Yes, exactly. You're already getting excited, and here she says that there's a headline: Olympics crowd showed European pride by booing JD Vance, and then up.
Well, I would, Kaya, did anybody cheer for you? Okay. I mean, I think people across Europe just, you, you make Europe irrelevant again.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's right.
So I mean, it's a bit rich here. Okay.
Yes,
An extremely unimportant, a marginalized person commenting on the popularity of someone else.
yes,
Wow. Okay. Good for you. Good for you, dear. Okay.
that's right. That's right. Anyway, it says the people who jeered Vice President JD
Is there
Vance.
a difference between booing and jeering?
Well, I
I
mean,
tend to think that there's more intensity with jeering than booing.
well, I always think booing is just simply a sound. It's a particular sound, boo. But jeering has other kinds of sounds.
Ah!
Exactly. Yeah. And people might say kind of nasty words and so
Okay.
on. So I think there's
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So jeering is more verbalized.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
All
It encompasses a variety of sounds, whereas booing, I think, is just one sound.
right. Okay.
And
We
but
got
this
we passed the lexicon test today.
exactly. Now she says displaying a European pride. It's a strange locution talking about pride because pride has now been so taken over by the LGBTQ movement that you kind of wonder, is that what she's referring to when she says European pride? Because I don't hear the word pride in any other context.
Yeah. Well, you can see how that movement destroyed that word.
Yes, exactly. As it long ago destroyed the word queer, which was a very good word
It
in
was
the
a
English
great
language.
word.
It was a great word, but it's gone. You can't use it. Um,
I could remember my parents' generation using that word, and then how we were forced to change its meaning. But my
yeah,
mother would say, isn't that queer?
that's
Okay,
that's right.
and,
Yeah,
and but no,
yes.
she wasn't referring to anyone's sexual habits.
No, 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 no. That's right. And you still, often, you read literature
Yeah,
written, just not that long ago, and still, cheerfully people using the word queer. That is queer. That's it. Following a string of critical comments from Europe about American officials, top EU diplomat kind of said on Monday, asked about the booing on Euronews's Europe Today show, the bloc's foreign policy chief kind of says, "Well, I guess we have heard a lot of not so nice words from the United States regarding Europe." So I guess she thinks it's quid pro quo, and of course,
as if there is a meaningful power relationship here.
that's
Okay,
exactly
yeah,
we're booing.
yeah. I mean, look who interviews her.
Yes,
Politico.
that's right.
Okay,
That's it. Yeah,
that's all you need to know. Do
that's
you
right.
think she will ever be in an adversarial interview?
No, no, no,
No.
no. No. So that's right. Um, and but she got in with, obviously she's always had this knack, her family has always had a knack of getting in with the powerful and the well connected, just like as her family did so well in the Soviet system, did very well after the end of the Soviet system, and then she kind of reinvented herself as a kind of this rabid warmongering Russophobe, and got herself in with Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, von der Leyen wanted her in that job.
Yeah,
Um,
because she didn't want anyone. She didn't want anyone with any intelligence to threaten
no,
her.
no, no.
This is what happened. It's like George H. Bush had
Dan
Dan Quayle
Quayle.
vice
Yeah.
president. Okay, no one to challenge
But
the
then,
limited intellect of these people.
well, but I do think that's a little unfair because George H.W. Bush was a very intelligent man. I mean, he didn't have to worry about any threat from Quayle. I mean, Bush did have a sterling educational record, and he held a number of positions, senior positions. He'd always fulfilled them without any complaint. I mean, I think he was an intelligent man. It was a lousy.
I'm not saying he wasn't intelligent. He just didn't want anyone more
No, I
intelligent.
know, but I think it's very interesting. The Dan Quayle thing it was always a mystery why he picked Quayle, because when you pick a vice president, there's always you know you're balancing the ticket. You want the geo
Or you're thinking of
balance or whatever.
or protege at some point.
Right, but like you have always the logic. There's always a logic. You think, okay, well, why did he pick this as the running mate? But with the case of Quayle, Indiana, I mean, that was a safe Republican state, so he didn't need that. Um, Ideologically, okay, he's kind of Quayle was generally kind of a centrist, and so it was an odd choice, and served Bush badly because he wasn't a very good VP, and did essentially detract from Bush's popularity, which was itself a problem. But anyway, to return to a much more important subject of the Kaya Kalas. Um, and so here she is with this. The remarks capture the tense state of EU-US relations ahead of this week's Munich Security Conference, at which European leaders are set to rub shoulders with members of the Trump administration. So they're still reeling from Vance's speech last February. And then here's this Politico article: Europe's big week of crisis diplomacy. This is a complete misnomer.
Well,
Because
I mean, George, where is the? I think crisis is appropriate here. Where's the diplomacy?
that's right, exactly. It suggests that Europeans are right in the thick of the diplomacy.
In the thick of it, yeah. All right.
Yes.
No,
And
they're in their own mud, is what
that's
they
right.
are.
That's right. So here's the outline. So Wednesday, the EU defense chiefs meet. One item on the agenda: support for Ukraine. Ukraine Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov will be there, and they'll be discussing the country's most burning needs as it approaches the 4-year mark of Russia's full-scale invasion. And then you think, well, gosh, what are they going to talk about? And then it says Fedorov is likely to request additional air defense missile systems, including Patriots and NASAMS, which have long been at the top of Kiev's wish list. The meeting will also discuss cooperation in defense innovation, which is code for drones and other new military technology. I'm not seeing the diplomacy. So it's a familiar begging bowl routine. But anyway, this is the agenda for the meeting. And then Thursday, there's an economic summit. And the Ukraine crisis will be on the back burner when leaders of the EU's 27 member countries descend on the tiny Belgian village of Riethoven to address the bloc's economic woes.
I think a lot of people want to skip that one.
Yes, exactly. And they will discuss how to make the EU richer. Well, I'm sure they're going to come to lots of very interesting conclusions.
No, what they'll just do is agree to go into debt.
That's right. From the simplifying legislation to strengthening the single market and reducing dependence on critical raw materials from other parts of the globe.
Yeah, and has anybody, citizens of the EU, do you have a seat at the table?
No.
Are you asked in any way, shape, or form? I mean, maybe somebody gives you a questionnaire or something, or maybe call you about your opinion. No, how do these elites have impoverished Europe,
Yep.
and they want to talk about enriching it.
That's right.
This is absurd.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. That's right. The only political leader who ever consults the populace is Viktor Orban. He regularly has these online referendums. Online referendum. That's not quite the same as a
it's kind of,
but at least it's something.
Finger in the air. Yeah, right.
Yeah, how do people feel? Anyway, European Parliament president. So this is this team that heads the EU. These horrific women. So we have.
Remind me what the Parliament does again.
It doesn't do a great deal.
Not a great deal. Did you know, George, that it can't even introduce legislation?
No, it can't. It rubber stamps the proposals of the Commission. But it's a nice job to be president of the European Parliament. It's a very well-paying job without too much work accompanying it. So Roberta Metsola, she's part of the network of von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas. She will make a cameo. It's like the cameo. The way you'd have Orson Welles would make a cameo. A cameo at the all-day summit, briefing leaders on the process of approving the EU-US trade deal.
And their leverage is
none.
Okay.
And then, of course, and then Mario Draghi, that's a name from the past. He's going to be
Yeah.
there. The former European Central Bank president, Italian prime minister. He was the guy who got to be Italian prime minister without having received a single vote. He was just parachuted into. Yeah, can
Yeah,
you be
they
prime minister? Sure, I'll be prime minister.
yeah called him at 4 a.m. You have a ready bag? You're prime minister. Did you know that?
You're the new prime minister, central banker. That's good. Um,
It's good to be him.
yes, yes. And so he'll be addressing the leaders and share their visions about European
Well,
competitiveness.
I think, we keep it clean here, but he's good at saying we're effed.
I love it. Competitiveness. Yeah, you're having a problem with competitiveness. I mean, you got when you're paying through the nose for your energy, then you're not going to be competitive.
And when you made the craven choice of cutting off, you did. It wasn't cut off.
Yeah,
You were
exactly.
not denied this energy.
That's right.
You decided to cut this
That's right.
energy off.
That's
Okay.
right. Exactly.
And who's using energy as a political tool?
Well, the United States, which openly boasted in its national security strategy document that it intends to do that. It intends
Yes.
to use its energy
Well,
dominance to get its
Sergei
way.
Lavrov said the last news cycle, which is exactly right. One of the strategies of the Trump administration is to control all energy routes in the world.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, then we have Friday, the Sunday, the Munich Security Conference. It's back to defense for the annual Munich conference, at which a host of big names, von der Leyen, Merz, Rutte, Rubio, and Zelensky will be in attendance. So no
Guess
Vance.
what, everybody? Guess what George and I are going to be talking about a week from today?
That's right. So, so Vance isn't giving a follow-up speech from.
Oh, yeah.
Officially, the topics addressed this year will be European security and defense, and the future of the transatlantic relationship. Didn't they talk about all this at Davos very recently? I mean,
Yeah, but I just get this strange feeling, George. Maybe you feel it too. Is if you want to have security, then is it fair to assume that for every single country in Europe, I'm not using the word EU right now, I'm saying Europe geographically, and you have that in your mind. Is it unreasonable to expect that all countries would want security?
No, that's
No,
not. Yeah,
this
no,
is not what they're going to discuss.
no, they never, they never.
Are they going to? Maybe diplomacy might
No, that's right.
great, a positive income. We haven't tried that for a long time.
What
See,
I was.
this is a circle jerk. Okay.
That's right. Do you remember? Did you read that a few days ago, or maybe last week? Macron said that he might call Putin one of these days. I might do it. I might just call him. Hey, you know how you call? You pick up the phone and then you dial. That's
Well,
usually where you make a call.
do you know what Buddy told me? Buddy told me that Apple might call Macron.
I'm putting in a call to Putin. What a ridiculous thing to say. You want to call? Call. Putin will take your call. Yeah, he always takes people's calls.
Here, Emmanuel. Here, go ahead. Take my phone.
Here's
Go
your
ahead.
phone.
I got a corporate account. I got a corporate account. Call
Yeah.
as long as you want.
That's right, exactly. So yeah, that's his thing about that's the Macron. Okay, I'm engaging in diplomacy. But yeah, so here's the But whenever they talk about, you're absolutely right. Whenever they talk about security, they mean security for themselves, which of course is no security, because as we've discussed many times, when you're only enhancing your own security and not really concerning yourself about the security of others, you're making the world a more dangerous place, not a less dangerous place, because then others start getting very nervous as to what exactly you're up to. And there's nothing new about this. Everyone has already known this. That if you enhance your security at the expense of someone else, then you are threatening the security of everyone. So anyway, he says, let me go back. So because here he's saying, officially, the topics addressed this year will be European security and defense and the future of the transatlantic relationship. Unofficially, the question on everyone's lips will be whether the EU has any hope of standing on its own 2 feet without Washington's help. And then they have here, Rutte doesn't think so. Telling EU lawmakers last month to keep on dreaming if they believe Europe can do it without the US. You can't, he said bluntly. And here is the story that where Rutte made this warning: Europe can't defend itself without the US. Rutte warns. And then here it says, Europe is incapable of
Well,
defending.
how did that happen, George? How did that happen?
Well, because
I mean, GDP is basically a meaningless number, but I'll invoke it anyway. The EU's GDP is larger than the United States. Okay, its population is bigger. I
yeah,
mean, it's not like they don't have technical universities.
right,
Okay, I mean, people of high taste.
right,
Okay, some august
right,
educational centers, and so how did this all happen?
right,
Okay,
right.
and why don't they talk about that? You know,
But
they never want an autopsy
no,
of
no,
what
they never.
they've done.
And this is this kind of empty bluster. This is they've been engaging in this for years and years and years. Every time the Americans start making difficulties for the Europeans, which has happened in the past, they start, oh, whoa, we're going to start, doing, our own thing. Everyone knows you are not going to do your own thing. You don't have, you would have to devote enormous amount of resources to become a serious military force in the world. You're not prepared to do that. This deal that you have with the United States is a very good deal for you. But you don't want to fulfill your part of the deal, which is to go along with the America's wishes. America says, fine, we'll take care of the military, but you got to play ball with us. You got to do what we want you to do. That's usually the way it works. They don't like that.
That's the way it was designed.
Yeah, that's right. So, but you got to support our policy, and that's what Trump said. Hey, you've got to support our policy. Well, we don't want to do that. We just want you to provide us with, the kind of defense.
Well, the Europeans act very much like the Israelis. The Europeans want the Americans to fight the Russians, but they don't want to fight. And Israel
No,
wants the United States to go to war with Iran, but they don't want to
no,
fight.
no, no, exactly. That's absolutely right. That's exactly right. But Rutte, I mean, you can see why Rutte doesn't like this kind of talk, because that's his
Well,
job.
he's going to lose his job. That's what he's.
Exactly. Hey, I got a job. I'm making, I don't know how many, astronomical salary that he's making as NATO Secretary General, during which he doesn't do anything other than he's just a PR person. He just does these news conferences. That's all
He
he
does daddy sitting.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. He seems to get on with Trump. So that was the qualification for this job. Stoltenberg he was very smooth. So whatever Stoltenberg, he was very smooth. He had these news conferences. Then he would go and talk to Trump, and again, always very smooth.
Yeah, about as smart as a box of rocks.
That's right. And making a nice living. I mean, I think you can say that. Rutte and Stoltenberg, they have made a nice living, and they will go on making a very nice living. Anyway, so here's Rutte, who says, if anyone thinks here, so this was, I guess he was speaking at Davos. Yeah, if anyone thinks here that the European Union or Europe as a whole can defend itself without the US, keep on dreaming. Now, he told lawmakers at the European Parliament's Defense and Foreign Affairs Committee, you can't. And then he goes on, a European pillar of NATO is a bit of an empty word, Rutte said, arguing a European army would create a lot of duplication with the alliance. And then, of course, moreover, the Russian President Vladimir Putin will love it. Rutte went on to insist that the EU allow Ukraine to spend part of the bloc's upcoming 90 billion loan to Kiev on weapons from the United States, because the Europeans are saying, no, you got to spend it all here in Europe, which, of course, the Americans aren't terribly happy with, despite a push by some members countries like France to spend the money on the bloc's own military suppliers. And then it says the comments form part of a broader pattern in which Rutte has insisted that Europe has to keep channels open to the United States, and that the U.S. president remains loyal to the alliance. And so, but
it's always amazing how, if it's not Rutte or it's Zelensky, how they speak for American foreign policy.
yes,
Isn't it amazing? It really is.
That's right. That's right. And then Rutte says, do you really think that Spain and Italy and Belgium and Canada would have decided to move from 1.5 to 2% without Trump. No way, Rutte said. And then this is where Rutte does say something sensible. He says, without the US, defending Europe would cost a fortune.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, every once in a while the truth slips through, doesn't
that's
it?
right. For Europe, if
No,
you
but if you don't want to pay that price,
Mhm.
then make peace.
you
See,
exactly
but
either
this
that,
is what I've been saying for
that's right.
donkey years.
Either that you
Yeah,
have two choices. Either you make peace with Russia, or you have to play ball with the Americans. You can't
there you
not do either.
go.
Yeah, I
There
mean
you go.
yeah,
It's
that's
it. They spend all this money on these conferences and meetings, and no, George just said it. It's that simple.
it's very simple. Exactly, it's really is
And
very straightforward.
in my opinion, it's not that hard to decide.
It's not how to exactly that, and that's what's sensible. You don't want to go to war. Nobody really wants to get killed in Europe, and you don't want to spend a huge amount on your military. Then it makes sense to
Ergo,
make peace.
ergo,
Make peace. If, however, you don't want to make peace, then you have to play ball with the Americans. But the idea that you can do neither, just neither peace nor play along with the Americans, just go on this in this way, that is idiotic, and it's an
it's a very Trotsky like approach at
absolute
Brest-Litovsk. No
right.
peace, no war.
Neither
And
war
then
nor
there
peace.
we
Yeah,
go. Here we go. That's
that's right.
it.
Yeah,
But see, they don't have the power.
right,
They don't have the capital or the imagination or the
right,
strategy to posit
no,
peace, no war. I mean,
right.
if you had assets and power, you could do that. But you have none of the above, so you cannot dictate no peace, no war. You can't.
No, that's right. Um, And then so here Rutte says, for Europe, if you really want to go it alone, forget that you can ever get there with 5%. He said, forget the 5%. Rutte said, referencing a pledge by NATO allies to ramp up their defending spending to 5% of GDP by 2035. It will be 10%, he argued, and cost billions and billions of euros to replace America's nuclear deterrent. So you're saying, you people, you're not paying the 5%. This is all a lie that they're paying 5%. You're basically, you're paying 2-3%, and the rest sort of
that's building bridges and
building bridges. Exactly.
roads.
And he's saying, forget the 5%. You're going to have to go up to 10% if you're going to start, being a major military power.
Well, that's a war economy.
And then of course, Politico says EU heavyweights deepen rift with Rutte over Europe's military power. They're not happy. The EU heavyweights, they're not happy with Rutte.
Yeah, because Rutte works for the Americans.
He works for keeping the organization
Oh,
going.
to keep the
He wants
grift going.
organizational. What's the organizational inertia? I mean, that's what he represents. We got to keep NATO on the road as it has always been. It's done me a lot of good. It's given me a nice big job, and I don't want anything messing up my nice big job. And then I've got a nice big job landing afterwards, like Stoltenberg, who got to be head of the central bank. I'm planning to be the head of the.
And you know what? Unlike other European countries, Norway has money to burn because it has a sovereign fund. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. I don't know about the Netherlands. Okay, I mean, they could always steal someone else's assets.
Right, but the
a
central
topic for another podcast.
Yeah, that's right. Central bank jobs, they're
always
well
nice.
paid.
They're nice.
They're nice job. Not a lot of work. Anyway, he says Europe must build its own military power and to survive a more dangerous world. Top EU officials warned Wednesday, sharpening a public split with NATO chief Mark Rutte. And then they quote this clown. This is part of the EU triumvirate of von der Leyen, Kaja Kallas, and the European Defense Commissioner Andreas Kubilius. This
is a box of rocks. These people.
Exactly.
Wow, George, you'd be shaking in your boots if you had to meet those people.
That's right. Yes.
I wouldn't even recognize them. I would probably walk right past them.
That's right. But it's very interesting that she surrounds herself with the most loony of all the Europeans. With the people from the Baltics, the most loony Russophobes, Kubilius and Kaya Kallas. Our answer to deal with this dangerous world: European independence, European autonomy, more European responsibility for our own defense. A European.
No, but that no, but that no, that's a complete misnomer. What she's saying, give me more power. That's what
Yep,
she's saying.
that's right. That's right.
She's
That's
not
that's
talking
that's
about
right. Yeah,
independence.
that's right. But you see, the reason why this guy and then Kaya Kallas talk in this way is that they have to work with the Americans, and it just infuriates them that Trump doesn't want to go along with this. They just want the war. I mean, they want war. These are the Chihuahuas who want the big dogs to start fighting. Yeah, you go on. They were go. And this is their plan. And so there's, oh yeah, Europeans. Remember when after the February meeting which was the disastrous meeting with Zelensky, and then Kaya Kallas immediately issued a statement: Europe must now become the leader of the free world. That's it. No, we're dropping America. We are the leader of the free world. And then she had to be told, you just cool.
Yeah. Well, I don't even think anyone in Washington took notice of such pablum. Okay, now you want to be the leader of the free? Go ahead. Well, that the Mark Carney, told us this is all of kabuki theater. Kaya Kallas didn't get the message.
Right.
This is all a fraud.
Yes. Yes.
Free world.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Oh yeah, as the EU becomes a totalitarian, construct, right?
Yes. That's right. Yeah. And so seeing that, just bringing up this the totalitarian construct, we should at least make a brief mention of that report by the U.S. House of Representatives about EU. Just, I mean, it's a very long report, but just to give our audience a sense of this, because it's actually a very good report. I mean, you have to say that's absolutely right in everything they say about this. That the EU is introducing step by step a police state, which is cracking down on all opposition viewpoints, and they're using the social media as essentially removing all content that that the powers that be that don't like.
They're doing it to protect the children.
That's right, exactly. That's
because
right.
Russia is threatening us. Okay,
that's right. Exactly.
The two pillars.
That's exactly. And then they coin these ubiquitous terms like hate speech. Which anything whatsoever can be deemed hate speech. And then, of course, but they do with the children. Oh, apparently there's everywhere there's this child pornography. No one's actually seen it. It's child pornography, which is already illegal. So it's like you don't need any additional legislation.
And meanwhile, hovering all around us now and forever, henceforth, the Epstein files. Okay,
that's right. That's right. And so here's just to give us a quick look at this report: the foreign censorship threat, Europe's decade-long campaign to censor the global internet, and how it harms the United States. And here is that it says that it's directly infringing on Americans' online speech in the United States, because, of course, these are all social media companies, are all essentially American. And once they start cracking down, then essentially they're cracking down on what can be displayed on social media, and which affect elections in the United States. Which is why that clown Thierry Breton, who was the commissioner for the internal market, issued that warning in 2024 against Elon Musk. You better be careful if you intend to interview Donald Trump, because you might be in violation of EU law by doing so. And though often framed as combating so-called hate speech or disinformation, the European Commission worked to censor true information and political speech about some of the most important policy debates in recent history, including COVID-19 pandemic, mass migration, and transgender issues. After 10 years, the European Commission has established sufficient control of global online speech to comprehensively suppress narratives that threaten the European Commission's power. And then here we have the DSA.
No,
This is
no lies
no
detected.
lies detectors, culmination of a decade-long European effort to silence political opposition and suppress online narratives that criticize the political establishment. And then say the Digital Services Act took effect in 2023, and the European Commission issued the first ever fine under the DSA in December 2025 against X, and so it's well worth reading this report. It's very long, but there's a lot there. Anyway, let's take a look at our locals page and see if we're going to answer some questions from Gagglers. We always like answering these questions. They're always very challenging, and so let's. And the first questioner is, of course, Cynthia. Always very good to see you, Cynthia. And Cynthia always asks us something very, very interesting and challenging. And it says, one of the men who tried to assassinate Russia's chief negotiator during the Abu Dhabi talks was later caught fleeing there. Is this the same Western playbook by the US, Ukraine, or Israel, using negotiations as cover while preparing attacks on Russia or Iran? If so, Araghchi's warning adds up. Iran will keep talking, but refuse to be tricked into lowering its guard after diplomacy with Russia ended in US-Ukrainian strikes, just as Iran talks were followed by US-Israeli attacks. Okay,
Well, I think
want to start?
I think that's absolutely what it's all about. Okay, part of the American negotiating strategy, at least under this president, is no negotiations, disrupt negotiations, and discredit them, and then point the finger. Well, see, the Russians accused that one of their negotiators was there was an attempted assassination against them. See, they're not a partner for peace, okay? Because we weren't behind that. It's so transparently true, and this is really, really terrifying because even if you go into a negotiation with good faith, you there's no reason to believe that your interlocutor is being honest about it, and.
Right.
And I think that this is where we are. This is where we are in Ukraine. This is where we are with Iran.
Right.
One side always is a bad faith actor.
Well, it's a very good question. Whether is Trump, how much is Trump involved in all of this?
Yeah,
Now,
we talked about this with Mark Sloboda,
right.
and I wasn't convinced the attack on Putin's residence that Trump was aware of it. I don't know which way to go on that one. He's
I
convinced.
I don't think it was over, because I think his initial reaction was a genuine reaction. He said, "This is he said, this is awful, this is terrible," and then he changed his tune. But even the negotiations before last June's attack on Iran, it looked to me like Israel kind of preempted the United States. Who knows at this stage whether was Trump really lying all along? Was he just being deceiving? But it looked like Netanyahu came, visited, and then suddenly the attack was launched. And then once he launched it, the United States came in to support Israel. So it's hard to know exactly how much Trump himself is involved. Either way, that's no excuse for Trump. You have to be on top of it. You're the president. You need to be on top of your own intelligence agencies. You can't allow Israel just to go off and do whatever he wants to do, and then present you with a fit.
Well, and you can't allow the CIA to have its own Ukraine policy.
That's
Okay.
right. Now, the one thing about this particular assassination, which I think is interesting, is the role of Alexeyev. Now, Alexeyev kind of has been identified by the British as having been involved in the attempted assassination of Skripal's. And because he was, he's really the powerful figure there. He's been deputy head of the GRU for years. And so I think the deputy heads, they're usually the ones who wield power because they're there forever. You can have new head and so on, but he's the deputy head. And that's why I just wonder whether this may have been instigated by the British,
Very interesting.
by
Very.
precisely because they have a whole beef with him going all the way back to the Skripals, and they were behind all of this. So it wasn't really an American operation; it was a British operation, and and that's why I wonder. I mean, the fact that the UAE cooperated so
Yeah,
quickly,
gave him. Yeah, yeah.
getting them back. There was no extradition process, nothing. They just bundled them in the plane and sent them to Russia. Then you kind of wonder that probably they didn't think the Americans were involved. I think if the Americans were involved, they might have hesitated sending them right away on back to Russia.
Yeah, and on top of it, if you the UAE, you want to hold that guy as the um, uh, the powers that be start squabbling among themselves who's at fault and let this guy go.
Right,
We don't know who this guy is. Why was he doing it? Why is
right,
he in the UAE? I mean, all of it. That they don't want that kind of public spat, and you would
right,
have that if he was sitting in some kind of holding cell in the
right,
UAE. Oh, just get him out the heck out of here right now.
right, right. So that's why
It's an
it
interesting
seems,
theory. It's an
yeah,
and it's the level of pettiness that we expect from the British.
exactly. This is they still going on about the Skripals thing. I mean
Yeah,
that's
and so are we. Okay,
that's right.
just in a different way.
That's right. That's right. And that's why you have to then think. It also has a strangely, the fact that they were able to get to the UAE immediately would suggest that somebody was helping them. I mean, that this was done very smoothly, and that's why in no time at all they're already in the UAE. Probably they were thinking that the UAE would protect them, but the UAE, they just may well have decided we're not going to help the British. We'll
Yeah.
help the Americans. We're not going to help the British.
Why invite trouble? Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And plus,
Right.
the UAE is trying. I don't know how much how honest they are, but they're really trying to cultivate themselves like the Qataris of being. Look, we don't want trouble. Okay,
No,
we don't want trouble. Okay.
that's right. That's right. And they want to keep in with the Americans, like Qatar. This is part of their raison d'être. Always have like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. Keep in with the Americans. Don't do anything to piss them off. It's an odd sort of assassin. I mean, 66 years old. That's not really a kind of a fighting age kind of assassin. I mean, if you're going to have an assassin, you want to have somebody, youngish and energetic. I mean, clearly, Alexeyev survived because he attacked the assassin. I mean, he fought back. So it's a kind of a fairly incompetent assassin who allows his victim to fight back against him. So it's like,
Well, and also
they weren't exactly match fit.
yeah, but maybe the assassin, it was, you never know why people agree to these things. I mean,
Right.
money up front, you leave it behind for your family. Maybe you have cancer. I mean,
Yeah.
you never know the motivations of these kinds of people. I mean, you anyone at that age, and I'm just speaking maybe close to experience as far as age is concerned, is that you know I've lived my life. I can help the people following me. I have nothing more really to aspire to, and it's a if it works out, great. If it doesn't, it's a suicide run. You never know.
When you said about the cancer, you're thinking about a movie in which
Yeah,
somebody.
yeah, yeah.
I forgot the title of the movie. But that was precisely it. That it
Oh,
was a,
it was about the killing. It was the vice president. No, the president's wife.
I was
I'm
thinking.
trying to
That
remember.
was a different. It was a
If
different
it
film I
was
was
that
thinking about.
Cuba,
No,
Cuba.
no, that was no. I think. Well, I don't know this one, but I was thinking about another film where precisely a guy who's terminal cancer, but he wants to provide for his.
I think there's more than one
Yeah,
film.
exactly. So it's a good theme for movies. Yeah. Anyway, so Cynthia then goes on and asks another question. Says Nigel Farage can talk endlessly about Epstein's alleged links to Russia, yet he goes completely silent on Epstein's well-documented ties to Israel and Mossad. That silence isn't accidental, it's deliberate. When you scrutinize everyone except one obvious target, it stops sounding like analysis and starts sounding like cover-up. That's very, very, very well put.
Look, George and I talked about this at length yesterday, and we have promised our viewers, or will disappoint our viewers. I'm not gonna. We're not going to sink our teeth in. The gaggle is not going to be about this, okay? And it never has been. It never will be. However, the question stands, and it's a very good one. If you're in the elites, and Nigel Farage certainly is, okay, and you want to start opining about this saga, be careful, okay? Be very careful. And that's going to be one of the lessons here. I seriously doubt there's going to be any meaningful litigation about all of this, okay? It's too amorphous, it's like this email, is this connected to that one? And, is this hyperbole? Oh, he says something completely different to someone else on the same subject. This is that murky world, okay? But my point is that if you want to interject yourself into this saga and tell us what you think it means, you better be very, very careful, because just as was pointed out. But what about this? What about Israel, for example? Okay, it's a world of trouble for you if you want to go down that path. That's one of the reasons why George and I are keeping. Of course, we're not ignoring it, but we keep it at a distance. I'm watching how everybody else reacts to it, particularly people that are in the files, which doesn't mean. And if you're in the files, it doesn't mean you've broken the law. Remember that.
Not in the slightest, because even in the case of Mandelson, where at least there might be instances of breaking the law, I have my doubts. I have my doubts whether divulging the details of a cabinet meeting, divulging details of something that the prime minister said to you to somebody else, I'm not at all sure that that's a crime. I mean, this isn't, Official Secrets Act. You're not violating it. So people gossip all the time. That's what gossip is about.
And that's what diplomats do all of the time.
You reveal details. The prime minister said this.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
You traffic in secrets, in innuendos, and lies.
That's right. So I have my doubts that even in the case of Mandelson, they're going to get anywhere if they do decide to prosecute him.
This guy is like a cold that never goes away, okay? And do you think the elites in the UK are going to prosecute a member of their elite? No, get a life. Get a life. Get a life.
That's right, yeah. And then again, but prosecute for what? Larry Summers, hey, he wants to have sex with a colleague. I mean, that's not a crime. I dare say he was married at the time. May not be very nice, but nonetheless, there's no crime there. And the people want the prosecutions, but they haven't quite figured out prosecution for what. But just going back to Cynthia's point, and I think we discussed it yesterday, Farage really, I think, has damaged his reputation. I think this is something that he should have absolutely distanced himself from, and instead of going down this ridiculous rabbit hole of suggesting that Epstein was working for the Russians. I think that it just completely discredits.
And it's also he's doing a 180 over the course of 12 months.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Anyway, then Cynthia goes on. That silence is even harder to ignore when you look at Farage's own record. His party took roughly £9 million from deep-pocketed defense tycoon Christopher Harborn, then launched the Reform Friends of Israel group. Farage has openly backed Israeli military actions, including strikes on Iran, and calls for regime change. Yep, he's done that. Regime change in Iran. At that point, it stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like complicit loyalty, reinforced by alignment money and what he refuses to say. I do think that in the case of Farage, he has done what I think a number of European conservatives have done. They've identified Israel as somehow within this realm, the leader of the kind of world conservative movement. I think they're completely wrong.
I do too.
There's been a long propaganda campaign led particularly by this guy Hazony, who headed the European, the sort of the Edmund Burke Society, and he's the inventor of national conservatism. And what he has done is suggest, well, Israel is exactly the paradigm, the model for what national conservatism is. Nation state, family, tradition, and we Europeans, Orban, Farage, the Dutch guys, going to name escape.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
guy.
the guy with the hair. That we're part of this, this
Right.
conservative movement, and I think Farage has bought into that. That somehow is
Yeah,
model of nation state conservatism.
at the peak of their power, these philosophers of the 1960s and
Right,
70s, it was a group called the Who, and they opined, and I think it is one of the phrases that we can live with for the rest of our lives. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Okay, and
right.
that's I'm sorry everyone, but I'll just say it bluntly. I've always thought Farage was a fraud. Sorry.
I tend to think that all of the things that basically, yeah, I think I absolutely agree with the fraud. All the things he promises, he's not going to do that. The whole idea is going to start cracking down on immigrants. He's going to start deporting illegals. Perfectly well he's not going to do it. I mean, you can tell everybody
What he's going to
he's not
do?
going to do it.
It's what this whole trans. They talk about the transatlantic
Right.
alliance and shared values. Well, what they do is they enrich each other. That's
Right.
what they do. Nigel
Right.
Farage, if you look at his economic, he's a neoliberal.
Right. Right.
I mean, seriously. I
Yeah.
remember during the Brexit campaign, he came out with this really splashy um, pseudo documentary. I mean, if you look at the economic policy, it's no, we're going to have the same policy, it's just a different
Well,
group of
it's
people running.
the return to Thatcher. So it's not basically it's this returning to Thatcher, which is all completely ridiculous because I think there's no demand for returning to Thatcher, as Liz Truss found
Found
out.
out.
Thought, oh, hey, we're going back to Thatcher. She was gone within a few weeks. So that there's no market for that, and I think that people are going to see through Farage. I'm absolutely convinced now he's not going to do well at the next election. People I know he's ahead of the polls, and we're already talking about his being prime minister. He is not going to be prime minister. The next election.
Well, it's very much
reform.
it's very much like when Ollie North was running for Senate in, was it West Virginia or Virginia?
Virginia.
Virginia. He was up in the
Right.
polls. And he had a nice chunk of money behind him, and he was cruising to a victory. And then, as a friend of mine pointed out to me, he said, "Yeah, the upper middle class, elite class in Virginia, it's just when they got to the ballot box, no, I
No.
can't." I can't. And I think that's what's going to happen to Farage. People
I
might get in the car or get in the tube with the intention of, and then you're going to have an epiphany. What? This guy?
That's
No
right.
way.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I absolutely. Anyway, then Cynthia says, on a lighter note, many saw the Winter Olympics opening ceremony as outright satanic. The enormous flickering double cauldron flame forming a dark, menacing pentagram. And at that scale, nothing is accidental. With Pizzagate and its grotesque, depraved, sadistic echoes in the Epstein files, elite pageantry can't claim innocence. What might once have been shrugged off as quirky, artistic flair now reads as brazen, ritualized, in-your-face provocation, impossible to ignore. I don't know.
But you should be syndicated.
Yes, I think so. That's very interesting.
No, but okay, not addressing everything that was said there, but I think it's a very interesting. It's an insightful formulation. See what this has done. It's infected our discourse.
Right.
I find these people abhorrent, disgusting, and I wonder what we need them for. Hint, hint. Okay, but it is polluted our conversation about how we talk about power, and it's I want to say, is it a good thing? No, it is a culmination of the behavior of these
Right,
people.
right. But I do think though the issue of satanic rituals, this has been now become a kind of a mainstream in our culture, which is I don't think has anything to do with Epstein and so on. It's just become mainstream. You know, for instance, I mean the Halloween, the way Halloween, which is kind of a satanic ritual, it's now become one of the biggest, most important
Yeah,
holidays.
with
Uh,
with
yeah,
adults, not
yeah, and
children, with
good.
adults.
Yeah, exactly, with adults. And so I do think that it's more connected with that, the way this has become mainstream rather than any kind of Christian festivities. It's actually the anti-Christian
And
festivities as
it,
demonstrated by Halloween.
it is a frontal assault against what we would traditionally call traditional values. It is an affront, and they have the power to do it. Remember the opening of the Olympics in Paris? I mean, that was one of the most revolting displays
Right,
I've seen in life.
right, right. That exactly. And then we have a question from NKMRD says, even if Trump was not aware of the attack on Valdai, there should be very serious consequences and lots of explanations and excuses being made. Right now, it looks like the USA tried to murder Vladimir Putin. It is what it is. Well, I tend to think that a stronger reaction would have been appropriate. The Russians didn't make the strong reaction, but you're right. It's there, and you can take it for what it is. Exactly. This was an assassination attempt, and there's no two ways about it, really. And in fact, the CIA has not denied that there was an attack. There was an attack. They claim it was an assassination attempt. Then what was the attack on? What were they targeting? So yeah, I think that's a good point.
But see, this, George and I started out this live stream talking about Trump's foreign policy. And really, what it gets down to in the lack of negotiation, it's just really kind of a transparent and very vulgar demonstration of dominance. It's always about dominance. And if you have to go through the kabuki theater of negotiations to show that dominance, well, then so be it. But the goal is not to negotiate conflict, it is to show dominance and who has the power to um, uh, get the policy ends that they want. And when you approach politics that way, you don't have to be very sophisticated.
Yeah. Anyway, Vic Shakapopoulos says, so if according to the two of you, there's nothing indicating that there was anything apart from parties and massages going on, why?
No, no, don't
Well,
do
okay.
that.
Well, let's look at it this way. I tend to think I'm not sure. I don't think Peter exactly agrees with it, but my take is I think that there was a less there than meets the eye. That's not Peter's view, but I can say that for myself. So a part of why would the DOJ withhold photos and videos that contain images of death, physical abuse, or injury from the Epstein files? Do parties and massagers usually involve? Well, no. I think the reason why the DOJ is withholding that we ultimately don't know because they tell us what the reason. They say that there were videos on his hard drive, not of parties that he himself or his friends engaged in. He was a great porn collector. He collected a lot of pornography, and so what they're withholding are all the porn films that he had collected. I don't know whether it was death or whatever. We have to go by what the DOJ says, but that they're saying these were the hundreds and hundreds of hours of videotapes. They are not things that had anything that he was involved in, but it was the porn that he had on his hard drive. Anyway,
There's a there. That's the answer to my question. The problem is, and take a look at what George and I had to say at length yesterday, is that how do you litigate this? Okay. How do you piece together a prosecution based on email? Emails are not the most reliable thing unless you say, yes, yesterday afternoon at 7:30, I killed this person. Okay.
right.
Then you can go there. But all of the euphemisms and all that, this is intra-group idiom in which they speak to each other. What does pizza mean?
Right.
There is a there. I think some really horrific, terrible
Well,
things
no,
happen.
well, this is, I think,
But
where I think I think we part company. I think you think that I'm very skeptical that there is
okay.
any of that, because we haven't really. There's been no evidence of this. I mean, when we talk about, the inappropriate sexual behavior, we're still stuck with what happened in Palm
Yeah.
Beach. That he was getting these massages
The
from
thing is,
those who were
George,
underage, according to Florida, but all the rest, these decadent
what
parties, are just, there's no evidence for it.
what I think I can distill it down. I mean, George, I think you would agree with me that we've just been given a mountain range of circumstantial evidence. Agreed?
Right, circumstantial, but
And,
evidence
and
of
and
what
you can
exactly?
fall on one side or the other to one degree or another, depending on what you're looking at. I I I continue to be very skeptical, but looking at some of the things that were written or exchanged, there's something really sick going on here. And George and I talked about it. We're running out of time really
Yep,
quickly. Is that George and I have agreed the definition of pedophilia is very
that's right.
elastic here.
That's right.
And you have to be very careful with
Yeah,
that.
I
Okay.
think so.
Pedophilia is a medical condition.
Yeah,
Age of dissent of consent is a legal
right,
realm.
right,
Okay.
exactly.
And you should not necessarily conflate the two.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
right.
why every single article, they like to use the PDF. I think we should use that term. Is that really the definition of what's going on here? Was there abuse? It looks like a lot of abuse. Were people paid or willingly paid? Looks like a lot of people were.
Well, yeah,
Okay,
I think this is where I think it's going far beyond what the evidence demonstrates. I mean, I haven't
but
seen
see,
the evidence for it.
but
There's,
George and I are good
there's a lot
faith.
of claims. A lot of people have been making claims,
George
but
and
we're not
I are
free of evidence. Yeah,
George and I are good faith interlocutors. I believe that very firmly, and you can come to different conclusions. But
yeah,
but the first question that we were asked about this proves my point. Everything is now being tainted by this. I think that's not a good path for all of us to go down.
that's true. And I think our time is now up. So thank you very much, everybody who had joined us. Thank you very much, everybody who asked us a lot of very interesting and very stimulating questions. There's a lot there to discuss. Much
And
more.
you guys like it when we disagree. I know you
Exactly.
like it.
That's right. But thank you so much for taking the time and the trouble to join us and to formulate such really interesting questions. Really appreciate it. Hope you'll do this for us next Monday when we do our joint live stream. And then please join me tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for my solo. So until then, all the best. Thank you. Goodbye.